3 weeks after the Viridian Belt rescue, the Galactic Council chamber looked different than it had during the emergency session. The space was filled with representatives from more species than had ever gathered before. Every major government had sent delegations. They had come to witness something unprecedented, the galaxy trying to understand humanity. Ambassador Deho stood at the central podium, looking tired. He had spent the past weeks coordinating recovery efforts, attending memorial services, and writing letters to the families of the fallen. 3,847 letters. He had insisted on writing each one personally. It was, he felt, the least he could do. The final mission statistics were displayed on the holographic screens around the chamber. 197,000 hostages rescued, 98.5% survival rate. Human casualties, 3,847 dead, 12,000 wounded. By every military calculation, the mission should have failed completely. Instead, it had succeeded beyond what anyone thought possible. Supreme Coordinator Veltas addressed the assembly first. Ambassador Deho, the Council wishes to honor the sacrifice of humanity. What your species accomplished was deemed impossible by our finest military minds. Yet you succeeded. Before we proceed with formal honors, we must understand. The galaxy needs to understand. Why did humans do this? Deho was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. We did it because someone had to. Those people were trapped and afraid. They needed help. We could provide that help. The cost was high, yes. Every death hurts. But leaving those people to die would have hurt more. Not their deaths, but our failure to try. Humans can live with many things, but living with knowing we abandoned people who needed us, that's not something we can bear. But the mathematical improbability, a Thalorian delegate began. Math doesn't account for everything, Deho interrupted gently. It can't measure hope. It can't calculate the value of a person's life in the hearts of those who love them. It can't quantify the weight of knowing you did the right thing, even when it was hard. Humans don't just run calculations, we feel things. And what we felt was that those people deserved a chance. Kelvora, the Vryn military analyst, stepped forward. She had been given the task of creating a comprehensive report on human psychology. Her findings had shocked the Vryn leadership so deeply that they had questioned whether her research was accurate. She had triple-checked everything. Honored delegates, she began. I have spent 3 weeks studying human behavior during the rescue operation. My findings are disturbing and transformative. Humans possess a psychological trait we have termed empathy. This is not simply understanding another's situation. It is experiencing another's pain as if it were their own pain. When humans encountered the trapped civilians, they felt the fear and suffering of those civilians directly. She displayed brain scans taken from human volunteers during the mission. These scans show that when humans see others in distress, their pain centers activate. They experience genuine suffering when witnessing the suffering of others, even strangers, even other species. This creates a psychological imperative to reduce that suffering, even at great personal cost. A Lumen delegate pulsed with confused colors. But this is inefficient. Why would evolution create beings who suffer from the suffering of others? We asked the same question, Kelvora replied. The answer appears to be that this trait creates powerful social bonds. Humans form groups that protect each other with extraordinary dedication. They call it love, friendship, loyalty. These bonds make human societies remarkably resilient. But more importantly, humans extend these feelings beyond their immediate groups. They empathize with strangers, with other species, with anyone they perceive as capable of suffering. She paused, her antennae trembling slightly. There is more. Humans possess another trait called hope. This is belief in positive outcomes despite contrary evidence. By all logic, the Viridian mission should have failed. Humans believed they could succeed anyway. This belief influenced their behavior, making them persist when any rational being would have retreated. Somehow, impossibly, this irrational belief contributed to actual success. You're saying humans succeeded because they refused to believe they would fail? Veltas asked. Precisely, Kelvora confirmed. They changed probability through determination. I have no framework for explaining this. I simply report what I observed. Soren, the Lumen observer, floated forward. May I speak? When granted permission, the being of living light pulsed with unusual intensity. I accompanied Engineer Jiwan during the mission. I watched her work without sleep, pushing herself beyond what should have been possible. She told me she was motivated by loss, by the memory of family killed by machine malfunction. She channeled pain into purpose. Soren's light flickered with what might have been emotion. In my culture, we believe in the accumulation of knowledge and the preservation of existence. We measure value in duration and information. But Jiwan taught me something. She said that what matters is not how long you exist, but what you do with the time you have. She believed that saving others gives meaning to existence. I do not fully understand this, but I witnessed her sacrifice herself to give others a chance to live, and I find myself changed by this. The lumen paused, colors shifting through spectrums that had no names in other languages. Humans measure value differently than we do. They believe that every individual consciousness has inherent worth, not based on what it knows or produces, but simply because it exists. This is revolutionary. It suggests that my people have been calculating value incorrectly for millennia. Quex, the Thalorian medical student, approached the podium with visible nervousness. For a Thalorian to speak in the council was unusual. For a student to do so was nearly unprecedented, but he had requested this opportunity, and it had been granted. I observed Medical Officer Tae Yang, Quex said, his voice bubbling through his translation unit. He was afraid. His biology showed constant fear responses, yet he continued working for 23 hours without rest. I asked him why he did not let fear control his decisions. He said that fear was information, but courage was choice. Quex's water tank cycled thoughtfully. In Thalorian culture, we respect fear as valuable data. To act against fear is considered irrational. But Tae Yang showed me that fear and courage are not opposites. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action despite fear. This concept has caused significant debate in Thalorian philosophical circles. We are reconsidering some of our fundamental assumptions about rational behavior. A delegate from the Crystalline Assembly spoke next, their body chiming with crystalline tones. These reports suggest that human psychology is fundamentally different from most galactic species. You act based on emotion and irrational belief. You risk proven assets for unknown returns. You sacrifice individual survival for collective benefit, even when the collective includes strangers. By every standard measure, your species should be less successful, not more. Yet you accomplish the impossible. How do we reconcile this? Daeho smiled sadly. Maybe the reconciliation is accepting that there are different types of strength. You calculate everything. You optimize for efficiency. You minimize risk. These are valid approaches. But humans optimize for meaning. We accept risk when we believe the cause is worthy. We are inefficient because we care about things that can't be measured, and maybe sometimes the unmeasurable things matter most. The chamber fell silent. Then Engineer Mayung, still recovering from his ordeal but insisting on attending, stood in the human delegation section. May I speak? Felthus gestured permission. I'm nobody important, Myung said. Just an engineer who hid in closets for weeks. But I was on those stations. I saw what the Nexus did. I felt the fear. And then humans came. They ran toward danger to save us. They died protecting people they didn't know. I watched a human medic named Chan-Woo suffocate because he used his suit to keep my colleagues alive. I never even got to thank him. Myung's voice broke slightly. I don't understand all this talk about psychology and evolution. I just know that when everyone else calculated that saving us wasn't worth the cost, humans decided we were worth it anyway. They looked at the math and said, we don't care about the math. Those are people. We're going in. That meant everything to us. It means everything now. The chamber erupted in discussion. Species debated the implications. Some were disturbed by humanity's apparent irrationality. Others were intrigued by the possibility of expanding their understanding of value and purpose. A few were already considering how to integrate these concepts into their own societies. Velthus called for order. The Council recognizes that humanity has demonstrated capabilities we did not know existed. In acknowledgement of this, we propose the establishment of the Human Initiative Program. This program will study human psychology, train other species in human methods, and potentially develop new approaches to problem-solving based on human principles. Additionally, Velthus continued, the Council wishes to honor those who gave their lives at Viridian Belt. A memorial will be constructed at the site, listing every name of every species who participated in the rescue. The alarm woke Dae-sung from a fitful sleep. This time it was the emergency klaxon, the sound that meant something was very wrong. He rolled out of bed, already reaching for his boots before his mind fully caught up. Old habits died hard. He reached the main hub at the same time as a crowd of panicked station workers. Through the main viewport, he could see it. A ship listing badly to port, trailing atmosphere and debris. Emergency lights flickered across its hull. "They're hailing us," Tivek announced, his blue Centauri skin pale with stress. "It's the Sanctuary, one of the refugee ships from Convoy Delta 7. The crowd went silent. They're requesting emergency docking. They have wounded." "Let them in," Hana said immediately. Several others nodded. Tivek looked uncertain. "If whatever attacked them followed, let them in," Dae-sung heard himself say. Everyone turned to look at him. He rarely spoke in crowds. "They need help," Tivek nodded slowly. "Prepare medical, and someone get security ready just in case." The Sanctuary limped into dock like a dying animal. Dae-sung watched from the observation level as the docking clamps engaged. The ship was shot to pieces. Hull breaches sealed with emergency foam, scorch marks that spoke of energy weapons, military-grade ones the airlock cycled. 12 people stumbled out. Only 12. Dae-sung felt his chest tighten. The manifest would have listed at least 200 souls on a refugee transport that size. The survivors were in bad shape. Burns, broken bones, faces locked in expressions of trauma. Medical teams rushed forward with stretchers and emergency supplies. One figure stood apart from the others. A woman, maybe in her early 40s with captain's bars still clipped to her torn uniform. She was supporting a teenage boy who could barely walk, his leg wrapped in bloody bandages. The woman's eyes swept the crowd, and then they stopped. Locked onto Dae-sung, she went rigid. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Colonel Park." Dae-sung felt the world tilt. Nobody had called him that in 15 years. He turned to leave, but she was already moving, pushing through the crowd despite the boy's protests. "Colonel Park Dae-sung, it is you." Up close, he recognized her. Older, harder, but the same. "Lieutenant Jiwon, or is it Captain now?" "Just Jiwon. I left the Defense Force 8 years ago." Her voice was sharp, angry. "After they threw away everything you taught us." "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, sir." "I was there. I saw what they did to you." "We all did." The boy with her looked confused. "Nuna, who is this?" "My old commanding officer," Jiwon said, still staring at Dae-sung. "The man who saved millions. The man who they destroyed for having a conscience." "I'm nobody," Dae-sung said. "Just a maintenance worker." "You're a coward." The word hit like a physical blow. "We sent distress calls for 6 hours." 6 hours. And where was the legendary Iron Wolf? Hiding in his maintenance tunnels. Several station workers were listening now, confused by the confrontation. Hana appeared at the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide. "Jiwon," the boy said weakly. "Please, I need to sit." Her anger cracked, replaced by concern. She supported her brother toward a bench. Medical personnel tried to take him, but he clung to her. Dae-sung should have walked away, should have returned to his tunnels and his pipes and his carefully constructed isolation. Instead, he found himself asking, "What attacked you?" Jiwon laughed, a bitter sound. "You want to know now? After they're all dead?" "Jiwon." She looked up at him and he saw tears cutting through the grime on her face. "We don't know. The Defense Force calls them the Vren Collective. They showed up 6 months ago in the outer sectors. Systematic, efficient. They hit colonies, stations, convoys, anything not protected by military presence. Why isn't the Defense Force responding? Because they're spread too thin across the core worlds. Because the politicians say the outer colonies aren't strategic priorities. Because people like you disappeared and there's nobody left with the spine to tell command they're wrong." The accusation stung because it was true. Tivek approached carefully.
"Captain Jiwon, we need to debrief."
"Understand the threat level." "Threat level?" Jiwon stood, swaying slightly. "The threat level is extinction. The Vren don't negotiate. Don't take prisoners. They came at us with 6 ships, cut through our defenses in 20 minutes. We only escaped because the convoy's escort destroyer sacrificed itself to buy time." "What do they want?" someone in the crowd asked. "Territory, resources. We think they're a hive mind species. Individual units, but one consciousness." She pulled out a battered datapad. "Kyung, my brother, he's good with tech. He managed to record some of the attack before I made him evacuate." She tapped the screen. A hologram projected above the pad. Dae-sung had seen combat footage before, had reviewed thousands of hours of it during his military career. But this made his blood run cold. The Vren ships moved with insect-like precision, Their weapons tore through shields like they weren't there, and when they boarded, the footage showed creatures that were part biological, part technological. They moved in perfect synchronization. No hesitation, no fear. The screaming on the audio made several people in the crowd turn away. "We need to leave," someone said. "Evacuate the station." "And go where?" Jiwon demanded. "Every outer colony is vulnerable. Every station. The Vren are spreading and nobody's stopping them." Tivek raised his hands. "Everyone calm down. We're far from their last known position. We should be safe." "The sanctuary's trail leads right here," Daesung said quietly. Everyone turned to him. "If they're as systematic as you say, they'll follow." "Clean up loose ends," Jiwon nodded grimly. "He's right. We've maybe got 2 days before they track us." Panic rippled through the crowd. People started talking over each other, shouting about evacuation, about calling for Defense Force support, about how this wasn't their fight. Daesung watched it all with the detached clarity of someone who'd seen this before. Fear turning into chaos, chaos turning into death. He caught Hana's eye across the crowd. She looked terrified but trying to be brave. 2 days, he said, more to himself than anyone else. That night, Daesung did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He opened the locked drawer and took out his old military tablet. His fingers remembered the password despite the years. The files were all there. Tactical databases, defense protocols, everything he'd sworn he'd never look at again. There was a knock on his door. He almost didn't answer. Jiwon stood in the corridor looking exhausted. "Can we talk?" He let her in. She looked around his sparse quarters at the tablet on his desk and her expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry," she said, "for calling you a coward. I was angry, scared. You weren't wrong. I was. I know what happened. After the court-martial, I accessed the sealed files. Took me 3 years and some illegal contacts, but I found out." She sat on the edge of his bed. "They ordered you to abandon Colony 7. Use it as bait to draw enemy forces into a trap. 60,000 civilians. Acceptable losses, they called it. You refused. Took your fleet in anyway. Saved them all. And Command couldn't forgive you for making them look like monsters." Daesung was quiet for a long moment. "I made a choice. Saved 60,000. But my career was the price. I was fine with that trade, so why hide? Why not keep fighting? Because they asked me to do it again. And again. Every time I refused, they'd court-martial another officer who followed my example. I was hurting the ones who believed in doing the right thing." He looked at her. "I disappeared so they'd stop. Well, it didn't work. The Defense Force got worse without people like you." "I'm not a hero, Jiwon. I'm just tired." She stood and walked to the door, then paused. 214 people were on my convoy. I got 12 out. 12. The rest died screaming my name, begging me to save them. She looked back at him. "You want to keep running from screams, old man? Fine, but I'm done running. I'm going to convince this station to fight with or without you." After she left, Daesung stared at the tablet screen. At his old command codes, still technically active in the system despite his discharge. At the tactical manuals he'd written himself. The screams in his head were louder than ever now. But for the first time in 15 years, he heard something else too. A question. "How many more before you stop being a coward?" He looked out his window at the stars and knew the answer. Knew it with terrible certainty. No more, not one more. Daesung found Tivek in the administrator's office at a 600 hours. The Centauri looked like he hadn't slept. His blue skin darker with stress. "We need to talk about defense," Daesung said without preamble. Tivek looked up, surprised. "I thought you wanted nothing to do with military matters." I lied. "We have maybe 48 hours before the Vren arrive. We can either run or fight." "Running seems wise. Where to?" "Every transport we have is slower than their attack ships. They'd pick us off one by one in open space. At least here we have structure. Cover. A chance." Tivek studied him carefully. "Jiwon said you were a colonel. Is that true?" "Was. Long time ago." "Can you actually organize a defense of this station?" Daesung met his eyes. "Yes. But you won't like my methods. I'll need complete authority over all security matters. No questions, no debates. People will die either way, but I can make sure some live." The weight of that statement hung in the air. Tivek was quiet for a long time, then nodded slowly. Do what you need to do. By 0800 hours, Daesung had commandeered the main conference room and spread station schematics across every surface. The tactical part of his brain, dormant for 15 years, roared back to life like a reactor coming online. Ji-won found him there, along with a woman named Soo-jin, who headed station security. Soo-jin had one cybernetic arm and the bearing of ex-military. She looked at Daesung with recognition and something like awe. "Iron Wolf," she said quietly. "I trained under your doctrine at Academy. Never thought I'd meet you. I'm just Daesung now. Respectfully, sir, you're whatever we need you to be to survive this." More people filtered in. A young person named Borum who ran engineering, barely 19 but with sharp eyes and clever hands. Mirai, the medical officer from the Sanctuary survivors, who'd seen enough combat to know how to treat battlefield wounds. Hana appeared too, looking determined despite her fear. Daesung looked at them all. "I'm going to be honest. Our odds are terrible. The Vren have superior numbers, superior weapons, and they think like a single organism. We're a mining station, with maybe 34 people who know which end of a gun to point. So we're dead," someone muttered. "Not yet." Daesung activated the holographic display of the station. "We have 3 advantages. First, we know this station's layout. Every tunnel, every crawl space, every weak point. Second, we're humans. We improvise. We adapt. We fight dirty when we have to. Third, they're expecting us to run or surrender. We're going to do neither." He zoomed in on key sections. Corrales Station has 6 main entry points. We can't defend them all, so we won't try. We'll seal 4 completely, using emergency bulkheads and welding if we have to. We'll funnel them into 2 killing zones here and here. His finger traced paths on the map. "Borum, I need mining charges rigged in these corridors. When they push through, we collapse the sections behind them, trap them in segments." Borum's eyes widened. That'll compromise station integrity. Better than everyone dead. Can you do it?" "Yes, but it's insane." "Good. Soo-jin, take everyone who can fight and split them into fire teams. I don't care if they've never held a gun. Fear and adrenaline make up for a lot. Put them in defensive positions with overlapping fields of fire." Soo-jin nodded, already making notes on her datapad. "Mirai, set up triage in the central hub. Keep it mobile. We'll be falling back through sections as we go." "Falling back?" Ji-won asked. "We can't hold the entire station. We're going to trade space for time and casualties. Make them pay for every meter. Give the defense force time to arrive." "You think they're coming?" Ji-won's voice was skeptical. "No, but we need something to fight for." He looked at each of them. "I won't lie to you. Most of us probably won't survive this, but some will. And those people will carry forward, because we stood here. Because we said no. Because humans don't give up, not even against impossible odds." The room was silent. Then Soo-jin stood. "Tell me where you need me, sir." One by one, the others stood too. The next 30 hours were a blur of preparation. Daesung moved through the station like a force of nature, his tactical mind breaking down every problem into solvable pieces. He found Borum in a junction tunnel rigging explosive charges with shaking hands. The young engineer looked up as he approached. "I've never killed anyone before," Borum said quietly. "You're not killing. You're saving. Everyone who survives because these charges go off, that's on you. Is that how you justify it?" Daesung crouched beside them. "No, I don't justify it. I just do what needs doing and carry the weight after." He moved on to the militia training area, where Soo-jin was teaching terrified civilians how to hold rifles. Most of them were shaking so hard they could barely aim. Hana was among them. She met his eyes across the room and gave him a brave smile. He wondered if she'd still smile after she had to shoot someone. Ji-won found him at hour 27. He was reviewing defensive positions, running scenarios in his head. "We're drilling in Section 7, she said. "I'm having trouble with the timing. Can you observe?" He followed her to the section. They ran through the defensive drill. When simulated enemies entered the killing zone, Ji-won gave the order to fire. Nothing happened. She'd frozen. Again, Daesung said calmly. They reset. Same result. Jiwan's hand was on her sidearm but wouldn't draw it. Everyone out, Daesung ordered. When they were alone, he turned to her. Talk to me. I can't. Her voice cracked. I see them and I'm back on the sanctuary watching people die, hearing them beg. I ran then and I'll run now. You got 12 people out. That's not running. I left 200 behind. Daesung grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. You think? I don't know that feeling. I've carried 40,000 names for 18 years. 40,000 people who died following my orders. Every single one haunts me. How do you function? I don't. Not really. I just keep moving forward because stopping means letting them win. He released her. You're terrified. Good. Terror means you understand what's at stake, but you channel it. You make it fuel. I don't know if I can. You can. I've seen your record. You were one of my best officers. That person is still in there. Jiwan was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Again. They drilled until she could draw and fire without hesitation. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. At hour 46, Kyung found Daesung in the armory. Jiwan's brother had recovered enough to walk without help, though he still limped. I want to fight, he said. No. You need everyone you can get. You're 16. I'm not a child. Kyung's eyes were hard, older than they should be. I watched my parents die on that convoy. Watched them get torn apart by those things. I'm not hiding while others fight. Daesung saw himself in that anger, the need to do something, anything to make the horror mean something. You can help, he said finally, but not on the front line. I need someone protecting the children in the core shelter. Someone I trust. Can you do that? Kyung looked disappointed but nodded. I can do that. At hour 47, Daesung stood in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vren were coming. He could feel it, that old combat instinct that had kept him alive through a dozen wars. Hana joined him. Are we going to die? Probably. You're not good at inspiring speeches. Never have been. He glanced at her. You can still evacuate, take one of the small transports. And miss the chance to see the legendary Iron Wolf in action? No thanks. I'm not that man anymore. Yes, you are. You just forgot for a while. She looked out at the stars. Thank you for trying. Don't thank me yet. The alarm sounded at hour 48 exactly. 6 Vren warships dropped out of FTL at the edge of sensor range. They moved in perfect formation, closing in on Corrales Station with mechanical precision. Daesung watched them approach on the tactical display. Beside him, Sujin, Jiwon, Boram, Mirai, and a dozen others waited for orders. This is it, he said quietly. Everyone to positions. Stay calm. Trust your training. And remember, every second you hold is a second someone else lives. They dispersed. Daesung remained at the command console watching the enemy close in. The old fear tried to surface. The weight of responsibility. The knowledge that people would die because of his decisions. He pushed it down. The first Vren boarding pods impacted the hull. Daesung activated the comm. All units weapons free. Show them why you don't threaten humanity. The battle for Corrales Station had begun. The first wave hit Section 3 like a steel fist through paper. Boarding pods punched through the hull, and Vren soldiers poured out in perfect synchronization. They moved like a single organism because they were. No shouting, no hesitation, just mechanical efficiency. Daesung watched on the tactical display as his first trap activated. The section's gravity generators reversed. Vren soldiers tumbled in confusion. For 3 precious seconds they were vulnerable. Fire. Sujin's voice crackled over comms. The militia opened up from concealed positions. Energy bolts and old-fashioned bullets tore into the disoriented Vren. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. The first squad went down. 1 minute to reinforcements, Daesung announced calmly. Fall back to secondary positions. The militia retreated through pre-planned routes. New Vren poured in to replace the fallen. They were learning now, spreading out, adjusting to human tactics. Boram charges on my mark. On the display, he watched the Vren flood into the corridor junction. exactly where he needed them. Mark. The explosion was deafening even 3 sections away. The corridor collapsed, trapping Vren soldiers on both sides of the blast. One group sealed off from their main force, the other unable to advance. G1, your team has isolated targets in Section 3B. Clean them up. Copy. This was how Dae-sung fought, not with superior firepower, but with terrain, timing, and the enemy's own momentum. He turned the station itself into a weapon. The Vren adapted faster than he expected. By the time they breached Section 5, they were using their fallen as shields, moving in patterns that minimized exposure. They're learning, Sujin reported. Too fast. Then we teach them new lessons. Dae-sung switched channels. Borum, vent Section 6 to space on my signal. But our people are already pulled back. Trust me. The Vren pushed into Section 6, following what they thought was a retreating militia. The doors sealed behind them. Dae-sung waited until they were fully committed. Now, emergency hatches blew outward. Atmosphere screamed into the void, dragging everything with it. Vren soldiers tumbled into space, their formations shattered. But it cost them. The station was taking damage, hull integrity dropping, and they'd lost 8 defenders in the first hour. Dae-sung reviewed casualty reports with the detachment of someone who'd done this too many times. Names became numbers. Numbers became acceptable losses, except they weren't. Not really. Sir, they're concentrating forces at Junction 7, Sujin reported. I think they're trying to punch through to Central Hub. Dae-sung pulled up the tactical map. She was right. The Vren had stopped probing. Now they were massing for a decisive strike. Pull everyone back to the hub. We're going to make our stand there. As the militia retreated, Dae-sung made a decision he knew might kill him. He opened a comm channel to the Vren flagship. A voice responded immediately. It sounded like 1,000 voices speaking in perfect unison. The hive mind itself, human commander. Surrender is optimal. Resistance is inefficient. This is Colonel Park Dae-sung, Human Defense Force. Here's my counteroffer. Leave now and we won't destroy your flagship. You possess insufficient force. You possess insufficient imagination. Dae-sung cut the channel and turned to Ji-won. I need a strike team. 5 people who can move fast and shoot straight. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. I'm in. Sujin? The security chief checked her weapon. Always wanted to punch above my weight class. Borum stepped forward despite their fear. You need someone who understands explosives. 4 others volunteered. Dae-sung recognized one of them, Tae-jun, a pilot from Ji-won's original crew. What's the play? Ji-won asked. Dae-sung pulled up a schematic of the Vren flagship. They're concentrating forces on the station. That means their command ship is lighter on defense than usual. We're going to board them. That's insane, Sujin said. Yes, I love it. They prepped in silence, checking weapons and seals on environment suits. Hana found Dae-sung before they launched. Come back, she said simply. I'll try. That's not good enough. He smiled, a rare expression. Then I promised to make them regret ever hearing about humanity. The boarding pods launched from hidden tubes on the station's underside. They crossed the gap in tense silence. Dae-sung remembered similar runs during the Convergence War, the feeling of being completely exposed, waiting for enemy fire to tear the pod apart. They hit the Vren flagship's hull. Cutting torches burned through. Then they were inside, in corridors that looked like they'd been grown rather than built, organic curves mixed with mechanical precision. Vren defenders appeared almost immediately. The firefight was brutal and close. Dae-sung moved on instinct, muscle memory from decades of combat. He saw Tae-jun take a hit. His suit breached. The pilot gasped but kept firing. They pushed deeper into the ship. Every step was paid for in blood. One of the volunteers, a woman named Yoonji, died protecting Borum from a Vren blade. But they reached the neural center, a massive chamber pulsing with bioluminescent light. This was the flagship's brain, the node that coordinated the hive mind's local operations. Borum started setting charges while the others formed a defensive perimeter. Vren poured in from every entrance. How long? Dae-sung shouted. 2 minutes. Tae-jun went down again, this time for good. He'd been guarding an access corridor. His last transmission was a gasped go. Sujin took his position, but the Vren were overwhelming them. She looked at Dae-sung and he saw the understanding in her eyes. Someone needs to hold them until the charges blow, she said calmly. Sujin, I've got a daughter. On New Terra. Haven't seen her in 8 years. Bad divorce, she smiled. Tell her I stood for something. That in the end I wasn't just the drunk who abandoned her. You're not, I am, but not today. She charged into the Vren horde, her cybernetic arm crushing skulls, her pistol blazing. Go, they ran. Behind them, Sujin's war cry echoed through the corridors. Then it stopped. They made it back to the pods with seconds to spare. As they launched, Daesung looked back at the flagship. The explosion started at the neural center and cascaded outward. The entire ship shuddered, its perfect coordination disrupted. Secondary explosions rippled across the hull. The remaining Vren ships broke off their attack on the station. Without the flagship's coordination, they were confused, vulnerable. And that's when the Human Defense Force arrived. A battle fleet dropped out of FTL, weapons hot. The lead dreadnought's signature made Daesung's breath catch. This is Admiral Wanshik to all vessels. Engage enemy forces. Corliss Station, we're coming to help. Wanshik, his former protege, the young officer he'd trained 2 decades ago. The Vren tried to retreat, but they were caught between the station's defenses and a fresh fleet. It was a slaughter. Within 20 minutes, 5 of the 6 Vren ships were destroyed. The last one fled into FTL. Daesung's pod docked with the station. He climbed out, exhausted and covered in ichor from Vren blood. Jiwon and Borum emerged beside him, also alive. But Sujin, Taejun, Yoonji, and another volunteer were gone. The cost kept climbing. The central hub was chaos. Wounded everywhere. Mireille moved among them like a ghost, trying to save who she could. The final count came in slowly. 31 defenders dead, dozens more wounded, but they'd held. Admiral Wanshik came aboard 4 hours later. He was older now, his uniform covered in decorations, his bearing confident. But when he saw Daesung, all that authority melted away. Sir, he said, voice thick with emotion. Wanshik, you made Admiral. I'm proud. They embraced, 2 old soldiers who'd found each other again. Later, in a private room, Wanshik explained, I've been searching for you for years. Some of us never believed the official story. We knew what you did was right. The court-martial was legitimate. The court-martial was political, and it poisoned the defense force. We lost our conscience when we lost you. Wanshik leaned forward. Come back. I can get you reinstated. Full rank, full honors. We need leaders like you. Daesung looked out at the stars. I can't go back to command politics. Can't play those games. Then don't. I'm authorized to offer you something else. Independent command. You choose your missions, your crew. Fight where it matters, not where politicians say. Why? Because the Vren are just the beginning. The galaxy's changing. We need the Iron Wolf again. Not the broken man hiding in maintenance tunnels. The leader who saves people. Daesung thought of Sujin's last words. Of the 31 names he'd added to his collection. Of Hana's smile when he'd promised to try. I'll fight, he said finally, but on my terms. No more acceptable losses, no more sacrificing colonies for strategy. Wanshik smiled. I wouldn't have it any other way. 3 months after the battle, Corrales Station looked like a different place. The damaged sections had been rebuilt, stronger than before. But more than that, it had transformed from a forgotten mining outpost into a symbol. A place where humans had stood against impossible odds and won. Daesung stood in what used to be a cargo bay and was now a command center. Tactical displays covered the walls, showing the terminus sector and beyond. People moved with purpose around him, coordinating missions, analyzing intelligence, planning operations. This was the Corrales Guard, his unit. His responsibility, Admiral Wanshik had been true to his word. Independent command, full operational authority, and enough political backing to keep the bureaucrats from interfering. But the best part was the people who'd come. Jiwon stood at his right hand, officially his second in command, but really his conscience. She kept him grounded when the tactical calculations started treating people like numbers again. Borum had transformed from a terrified engineering student into their chief technical officer. They'd rigged systems that broke so many regulations that Daesung had stopped counting. But they worked, and that's what mattered. Mireille ran medical, training new combat medics with the hard-earned wisdom of someone who'd held too many dying hands. She never sugar-coated the cost of their missions. And Hana, bright-eyed Hana who'd once brought him coffee in maintenance tunnels, now headed intelligence operations. She had a gift for seeing patterns, for understanding how pieces fit together. She also kept the unit's morale up with her stubborn optimism. Morning briefing in 5, Jiwon announced. The team gathered around the central display. They'd grown from the original survivors to nearly 200 personnel. Humans mostly, but other species had started joining too. Word had spread about Corrales Station, about humans who fought when others ran. "Status report," Daesung said. A young officer named Yunji, who'd taken Sujin's place in security, spoke first. Colony 17 sent another request for escort. They're due for a supply run next week and intelligence suggests Vren scouts in the area. Assign beta team. Full protection protocol. The Defense Force says they'll have ships available in 3 weeks, Jiwan interrupted. Colony 17 needs help now. We're 2 days away. Daesung nodded. Next, the briefing continued. Refugee convoys to protect, colonies to reinforce, intelligence to gather on Vren movements. The Corrales Guard had become what the Defense Force should have been but wasn't. Fast, flexible, and willing to go where they were needed most. After the briefing, Hyung found Daesung reviewing supply manifests. Jiwan's brother had recovered fully and was now training as a pilot. At 17, he was technically too young for combat missions. Daesung looked the other way. "I've been practicing the atmospheric entry maneuvers," Kyung said. "I'm ready for certification. Show me the sim scores." Kyung pulled up his datapad. The numbers were good. Better than good, actually. The kid had a natural talent. "You crash even once in real combat and your sister will kill me," Daesung said. "Is that a yes?" "That's a don't make me regret this." Kyung grinned and rushed off. Daesung watched him go, seeing echoes of the traumatized boy who'd arrived 3 months ago. People healed. Not completely, but enough to keep moving forward. That afternoon, they deployed on a mission to evacuate a research station ahead of a Vren advance. The operation went smoothly, textbook precision. But on the flight back, Daesung found himself thinking about how routine it had become. They'd run 17 missions in 3 months, saved thousands of lives, and slowly, painfully slowly, the Vren advance had stalled. Not because of the Defense Force's grand strategy, but because small groups like the Corrales Guard were bleeding them everywhere. Death by 1,000 cuts. Jiwan found him in the observation deck later that evening. "You're brooding again." "I'm thinking. Same thing with you." She joined him at the window. "The Council of Species formally acknowledged our existence today. We're officially a recognized militia force. Politics. Politics that mean we get better funding and equipment. I'll take it." Daesung was quiet for a moment. 31 people died defending this station. Now we're risking lives every time we deploy. When does it end? When the Vren stop? Or when we do? She looked at him. "You asking if this is worth it?" "I'm asking if I'm leading people to their deaths for nothing." "You're leading people to fight for something. That's not nothing. Sujin died so the rest of us could live. She chose that. Everyone here chooses to be here, including you, especially me. For the first time since the convoy, I feel like I'm actually doing something that matters. We're not politicians making grand strategies. We're the ones who show up when someone screams for help." A proximity alarm interrupted them. Daesung and Jiwon rushed to the command center. "Unknown ship dropping out of FTL," Yunji reported. "No IFF signature. Battle stations. The ship was damaged, listing badly, and it was broadcasting a distress signal in Vren code. It's a trap," someone said. But Daesung studied the sensor readings. The ship wasn't a warship. It was a scout, maybe a courier. And its damage was consistent with Defense Force weapons. "Hana, can you translate that signal?" She worked quickly. "It's not a distress call. It's a request for asylum. The ship contains Vren who've separated from the collective?" That got everyone's attention. Vren didn't separate. They were a hive mind. "Could be a trick," Jiwon said. "Only one way to find out." Daesung opened a comm channel. "Unknown vessel, this is Corrales Guard. State your intentions." The response came in broken standard. "We are broken minds, severed from unity, seeking sanctuary." 2 hours later, Daesung stood in a sealed docking bay facing 3 Vren. They looked wrong somehow, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Individual through a translator, they explained. The destruction of the flagship at Corrales Station had damaged the local hive mind network. Some Vren had been cut off, forced to think as individuals for the first time. It was traumatic, disorienting. But some had realized they didn't want to go back. "The collective hunts us," one Vren said. "We are broken, but we choose broken over slavery. The Council of Species would never believe this. Most of the galaxy saw the Vren as mindless conquerors, but Daesung saw something else. Individuals trying to escape their programming. You want asylum, you work for it, he said. You provide intelligence on Vren tactics, strategies, weaknesses. In return, we protect you. The Vren agreed. News of the broken mines spread fast. Some called it treason to harbor the enemy. Others saw it as a propaganda victory. Daesung didn't care about either. He cared that the intelligence they provided saved lives. 6 months after the battle for Corrales Station, the Corrales Guard had become a legend. Volunteers came from across human space and beyond. Other species sent observers, then troops. A Centauri diplomat asked Daesung how he'd built such loyalty. I didn't build anything, he replied. I just stopped running. Everything else followed. The war against the Vren continued, but the tide had shifted. The collective's advance had stalled completely. Colonies that would have been overrun were holding, and everywhere people were fighting back. 2 years after that first battle, news came that shocked everyone. The Vren collective had agreed to a ceasefire. Not surrender, but recognition that conquest would cost more than it gained. The Council of Species threw celebrations. Parades, ceremonies, medals for heroes. They offered Daesung everything: a generalship in the reformed defense force, a seat on the council as humanity's representative, his choice of any posting in the galaxy. He turned it all down. You're really going back to Corrales Station? Admiral Wanshik asked, disappointed but not surprised. Someone has to train the next generation, and I'm tired of ceremonies. The Iron Wolf, humble to the end. Just Daesung. The trip back to Corrales felt like coming home. The station had expanded, a small city in space now. But the core remained the same. Hana met him at the dock, older now, but with the same bright smile. Welcome back, old man. I was only gone a week. Felt longer. That evening, the core team gathered for dinner in what had once been the bar where Daesung drank alone. Now it was filled with laughter, with people who'd become family. Jiwan raised a glass. To Sujin, Taejun, Yunji, and all the others. We carry them forward. To the fallen, everyone echoed. Later, Kyung asked Daesung if he'd found peace. The old soldier looked around the table at faces scarred by war but still capable of joy. At Borum explaining some technical detail to an interested Mirai. At Hana telling an embarrassing story about him that made everyone laugh. At Jiwan, who'd become the sister he'd never had. I thought peace was silence, he said finally. Thought it was hiding from the screams. Turns out it's knowing you're fighting for something worth dying for. It's having people you die to protect and who'd do the same for you. That's not peace. That's family. Maybe they're the same thing. A new distress call came in that night. The colony under attack. Pirates this time, not Vren, but people in danger nonetheless. The team suited up without hesitation. They'd done this dance 100 times now. Daesung looked at them all, his pack, his family. They weren't the biggest force in the galaxy, weren't the most powerful or best equipped, but they were human. And they showed up when it mattered. Let's go remind the galaxy why you don't mess with humanity, he said.